Hi, I'm April Rozzo, one of the registered dietitians with Florida Cancer Specialists and Research Institute, and welcome to my kitchen for our next episode of the Virtual Wellness Teaching Kitchen. Today we are making a chocolate raspberry no-bake pie. So it comes together really easy, and it's perfect, and you'll see why, for Valentine's Day. So if you're looking for something special to put together for your loved ones, this really makes an impression, and it's super easy. So the first thing we're gonna do is a graham cracker crust. Now, I said no bake, right? I am gonna bake the crust simply because I want you to see how easy it is to do it. But you certainly can buy just a pre-made graham cracker crust at the grocery store, and then this is truly a no-bake recipe, okay? But look how easy this is. So about 1.5 cups of graham cracker crumbs. You can buy regular full-size graham crackers and throw them in a food processor. You can buy a box of graham cracker crumbs already crumbed, I guess you would say. So about 1.5 cups, or if you've got the box of graham crackers, it's one package. So 9 or 10 of the rectangular graham crackers, the sheets. 2 tablespoons of granulated sugar, and then about 4 tablespoons of melted butter. So I'm gonna pour all of that in, okay? And then I'm just gonna give it a stir. We wanna get everything combined, and I want the butter to coat all of the graham cracker crumbs. So you will see that this mixture starts to get kind of sandy. It starts to hold together, right? It starts to get thick as the butter coats all of those graham crackers. Make sure the sugar gets dispersed in there, okay? Now, you might notice that some recipes call for more sugar. I've seen a lot of recipes for graham cracker crusts that call for 1/4 cup of sugar, which is double what I put in. To me, the graham crackers are already kind of sweet. They're honey, right? They're honey graham crackers. And wait until you see this pie. The pie is super rich in its own right. There's not a ton of sugar in it. It's just really rich. So you really don't need that much sugar in your crust, okay? So now that we've got it, 9 or 10 inch pie crust. 9 inches great. If all you have is a 10, that's fine as well. And you just want to really kind of flatten it out. If you have enough graham crackers, try to push it up the sides of the pie pan a little bit so that crust kind of comes up. Okay, now I have a 10 inch, this is a 10 inch pie pan, so the graham crackers aren't gonna come as far up on the pan, but certainly if you have a 9 inch, they'll make a really nice crust, and it'll give you some edges on that crust too, okay? Try to make sure that there aren't any big gaping holes in your crust, otherwise the pie will kind of seep through. You want it nice and tight and compact, okay? Just like that. So once you've got your pie crust kind of set, pop it in the oven, 350 for 7 or 8 minutes. So we're just gonna let that go while we make the rest, while we make the filling, okay? So what we're gonna do now, I am gonna set a timer because otherwise you guys know me, I start talking and then I forget and I burn things. So we're gonna set a quick timer for 7 minutes, okay? The next thing we need to do for our filling is melt some chocolate. So I've got about 1.5 cups of just semi-sweet chocolate chips, and I'm gonna throw that in the microwave. We're gonna start with about 45 seconds because I don't wanna burn the chocolate. It's better to go little intervals, little increments at a time so that you don't burn the chocolate. So we'll start with 45. And we'll probably have to microwave this a couple of times to get everything nice and melted. But again, it's better to go slow than to burn things. So once this is done, we're gonna make sure it's nice and melted and smooth. And then we're gonna move on to the next part. We're gonna start putting everything in the blender. So here's the surprise. You might be surprised that on our healthy teaching kitchen, the dietitian is telling you how to make a pie. And that's because this pie uses a secret ingredient, and that is silken tofu. Please don't turn off the video and run for the hills. Silken tofu, if you've ever used tofu or if you've never used tofu and you're totally unfamiliar with it, tofu does not have a flavor of its own. So we're just gonna give this a quick stir. It's starting to melt, you can see, okay? And so we're gonna put that back in the microwave for about 30 seconds. There we go. Silken, any tofu, whether it's silken or firm or extra firm, it comes in different textures, doesn't have a flavor of its own. So tofu takes on the flavor of whatever you're cooking it with. So it's great in marinades or stir fries or soups or stews where the broth is really flavorful. Extra firm tofu can take the place of meat or chicken because it has that nice kind of chewy texture. Silken tofu is just the opposite. It's really smooth and soft and creamy, kind of like a pudding or a custard. And that allows us to make this pie with way less fat. So normally when you make a no-bake pie like this, you're using heavy cream, heavy whipping cream, and that's what creates the rich, smooth, thick texture, like moussey texture in these pies. It also adds a ton of fat and calories. So by using silken tofu, which is creamy and smooth, it takes the place, it completely substitutes the heavy whipping cream, and it's still, so it provides this really smooth, creamy texture. Because it's thick on its own, it helps the pie set up the way whipping cream would, and it just makes it taste really rich and decadent without all of the calories and fat that normally come with rich, decadent desserts. So that's why we're using tofu. And I promise you, if you make this recipe, don't tell your guests that there's tofu in it. Just tell them it's chocolate raspberry pie, and not a single one of them will know the difference. I promise, okay? So try this recipe. It will be a real showstopper and actually a little healthier for you so that you can kind of indulge in your pie guilt-free, okay? So we've got this nice and melted. All the chocolate chips are melted. It's really smooth. All right, so we're gonna set that aside just for a second and let it cool off a little bit. In the meantime, we've got our tofu. Don't be scared by how it looks. Now, depending on what grocery stores you have available to you, you can get non-refrigerated, shelf-stable tofu. It comes in a 12-ounce package. It would be in the Asian food section, or if you have an Asian grocery store, or some of your natural food stores like a Whole Foods or a Fresh Market or Trader Joe's. You might be able to find it there. My grocery store did not have any shelf stable, so I found this in the refrigerated section. Let me get the other mitt here. In your grocery store, in the produce area where they have the wall of orange juice options, there's a little section in the grocery store over by the orange juice, it's refrigerated, of the plant-based products, kind of the meat substitutes, the vegan options, and that's where I found the refrigerated packages of silken tofu, okay? So you can get that at any of your regular grocery stores. So pie crust out of the oven. I'm gonna turn the oven off and just kind of let that rest, let it cool for a couple minutes while we do the filling. So we're gonna take our tofu here Scrape the chocolate off. Not that it matters because it's all going in the blender eventually, but we'll go ahead and kind of clean that spatula off here a little bit. So I want the tofu, I'm just gonna do, the whole filling comes together in the blender. All right, so I'm just gonna drop about 1 1/3 cups. So if you do buy the package of the refrigerated tofu, you don't need to use the whole thing. You're only gonna need about 1 1/3 cups, okay? Let's make sure all of that goes in. And then we're gonna blend this until it's smooth, okay? So it's gonna get noisy here for a second. Okay, so that's the first part. Now we're gonna add our melted chocolate straight into the blender here. Okay. And then to that, we are also gonna add about a tablespoon of pure maple syrup. And I'm super spoiled because my sister lives in Vermont and she makes her own maple syrup. So not only do I have pure maple syrup, but I have homemade maple syrup. I'm sorry if I made all of you angry and jealous. All right. So about a tablespoon of syrup goes in there, okay? And then a teaspoon of vanilla extract goes in. So this recipe is not sugar-free. We've got the chocolate, we've got the maple syrup. We're gonna be putting a little bit of powdered sugar in there. We're gonna blend this again. And in between blending, go ahead, see how it's not blending well on the sides. In between blending, you wanna go ahead and get your spatula in there, scrape the sides down, because we really wanna make sure that all of this gets blended together, okay? We're gonna blend that again. Whoops, would help if I didn't turn it off. Okay, and now to this, we're gonna add that powdered sugar that I mentioned. Now, the reason we're using powdered sugar or confectioner's sugar instead of just granulated sugar is that powdered sugar is so soft, it's powdery, right? So it's gonna dissolve a lot easier so that it doesn't taste gritty, right? When you're cooking a pie filling, you can use that regular sugar and the sugar granules are gonna dissolve while you're cooking it. But since this is a no-bake and it's all going in the blender, the powdered sugar is gonna dissolve in there a lot easier. And then we've got, so that was a 1/2 cup of powdered sugar. We've got about a cup of raspberries. You can use fresh or frozen. This was frozen and thawed, okay? Just to make my life a little easier. And back to the blender, all right? We want to blend this all up together. And we're going to let this go for a little while. I got this out because I'm going to bring my pie crust over here, so that when that's done, we're gonna give it another stir and blend it again. But when that's done, we'll be able to pour it straight into our pie crust. Let's pop this open and scrape the sides again. I'm gonna scrape the lid too a little bit, get that in. Okay. We don't wanna miss out on any of the creamy goodness, right? So scrape down your sides again of the blender. Make sure you get everything incorporated. Now, this looks really dark right now. I'm sure you're looking at the blender versus the picture on the website or the recipe. And by the way, this recipe is another one from Eating Well. If you guys have been with me before, you have heard me talk about Eating Well and how much I like their recipes. This is another one from them. It lightens up. The color becomes a little bit more pink as it chills in the fridge. So it's not just gonna look chocolate. Okay, so now we take a peek. It looks pretty smooth and creamy to me, you guys. Wait until you see this. We're gonna take this out and pour it into the pie crust. So see how thick it is? Thick and moussey? And you can kind of see a little bit of a pinkish color to it already. But like I said, it's going to lighten, the color's gonna lighten after it chills in the fridge. I'm just getting this out of my way so that I can get all the rest of that great filling. There we go, much easier. Okay, so just pour all of that in. Now, here are some tips. You can make this ahead. Because it just chills in the refrigerator, you can make this the day before. You can make it a couple of days before. It's good in the refrigerator for 3 or 4 days, okay? So you absolutely can make it ahead of time and not have to worry about making it on the day that you're serving it, especially if you're busy or making other things to go with it. It also, I found out, freezes exceptionally well. So I would slice it. I have not tried to freeze the whole pie as is. What I did was I sliced it up and then put all the slices on parchment paper on a baking sheet and put the baking sheet in the freezer, froze it overnight because it gets a little sticky. If you freeze it all together, then the pieces are gonna stick. The filling's gonna stick to each other. So freeze the pieces on a baking sheet, and then the next day, once it's frozen and not sticky, you can put all the slices of pie in a container or like a freezer bag or something, and then you can pull it out by the slice or you can pull it out to share, whatever you would like, okay? So there we go, pie made, right? This is the easiest, this is probably one of the easiest pies you are ever gonna make. And we're gonna put this in the fridge, okay? And then I'm gonna show you how it comes out. Now, if you're using fresh or frozen raspberries, set a few aside so that you can use them for a pretty garnish afterwards, okay? So this is gonna go in the fridge. And then I'm gonna show you what this pie looks like when it's all done and set, right? So it sets perfectly. That silken tofu creates the thickness, right? But it's also, if I grab my fork, look at how nice and creamy and moussey that is, right? I'm telling you, you are gonna impress people if you make this pie. And it's super decadent. No one will ever know that it's low fat, high protein, and maybe kind of good for you. So enjoy your Valentine's Day, and thank you for joining me for another episode of our Teaching Kitchen.